to blacklist her. I thanked him and made a mental note to send him a bottle of something strong. That same day, Clarissa texted too. She'd sent Karen a final invoice and a legal warning. Karen responded by blocking her number and threatening to report her to the Better Business Bureau for emotional damages. The fabric of her delusion was unraveling, and every thread exposed another lie, another corner she cut, another person she betrayed. And yet, she still hadn't called off the wedding. The date was approaching, and the invitations had already gone out. People were expecting a lakefront ceremony. But I had no intention of giving her the fairy tale ending she imagined. If Karen wanted drama, she was about to get a front-row seat to the storm she created. By the time the weekend arrived, the pressure surrounding Karen's fantasy wedding had reached the boiling point. Vendors were bailing, rumors were swirling, and angry whispers buzzed across the neighborhood like mosquitoes on a summer night. But the woman at the center of it all showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, Karen doubled her efforts. She started appearing at community functions with a painted-on smile and a voice full of syrup, telling anyone who would listen that everything was perfectly under control, that the venue was being upgraded, and that I was going through a difficult emotional phase, but would come around for the good of the neighborhood. That last one nearly made me choke on my coffee when I heard it from the mailman, who looked like he'd just been asked to deliver anthrax. He handed me a letter marked urgent from the HOA office. Inside was an invitation to an emergency town meeting scheduled for Monday night. The subject line read, "Resolution regarding lake cabin access and wedding permissions." I laughed aloud. It wasn't just audacity anymore, it was full-blown insanity. Angie practically clapped when I told her. "You couldn't script this better," she said, already printing out our entire evidence package like she was prepping for a courtroom drama. We had everything. The deed showing my property predated the HOA. The state heritage registration. The vendor audio. The bounce checks. The security footage. Even a notarized letter from my late uncle's attorney affirming the cabin was never promised, donated, or considered community property. Angie arranged everything into neat folders labeled with tabs. Property rights, harassment, fraud, trespass, misrepresentation. If this was a war, we were going in armored. The town meeting took place at the local community center, a squat brick building with terrible acoustics and folding chairs that wobbled under the slightest movement. When I arrived, the room was already packed. HOA board members sat in a row like grim-faced royalty, while Karen, dressed in a pristine white suit and a pearl headband, stood near the podium with a stack of papers and a frozen smile. A PowerPoint projector was warming up behind her. Someone offered me a seat near the front. I declined and stood at the back with Angie. We wanted a full view of the fireworks. Karen opened the meeting like a politician running for re-election. She thanked everyone for attending, mentioned the importance of community values, and launched into a lengthy speech about her vision for inclusive celebrations, traditions of shared spaces, and the beautiful unity symbolized by a wedding. Her voice quivered with feigned emotion. I counted 5 people yawning and at least 2 checking their phones. Then came the twist. She clicked to the next slide and displayed a digitally altered document claiming to show that my late uncle had verbally agreed to let the HOA use the cabin for any celebratory purpose. I could hear Angie's breathing change. The letter was a fake, badly formatted, full of typos, and using a signature that looked traced. Karen continued without shame. She claimed that due to this historical understanding, the HOA had not overstepped its bounds, but simply activated a long-standing community benefit. She said I had refused out of bitterness and isolation, and that her wedding represented a healing opportunity. It was manipulative, theatrical, and utterly disconnected from reality. When she finished, she invited anyone with questions to raise their hands. The room was silent for a moment. Then I stepped forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just walked to the center, held up a manila folder, and said, "Everything she just said is false." Dead quiet. I passed the folder to the board chair, then handed out copies to the other board members. These are certified documents from the county, state, and family estate attorney. My cabin is private property, not governed by the HOA, protected under a historical landmark clause, and legally barred from unauthorized events. Any action taken by this board to claim otherwise is a violation of state law. The board chair flipped through the pages quickly. Karen tried to interrupt, but Angie stepped forward with the vendor audio ready on her phone. "May I play a statement from the wedding planner?" she asked. The chair nodded. Clarissa's voice rang through the room loud and clear, describing how Karen had forged venue permissions and misrepresented ownership. The room shifted. Some gasped. Some started murmuring. Karen's face turned the color of raw chicken. She lunged toward the table and tried to snatch the speaker, but Angie slid it out of her reach with a lawyer's precision. "There's more," I added. "Footage of her trespassing, damaging signs, and making false reports." I looked directly at Karen. "You've turned a personal fantasy into a community liability." The room erupted into whispers, some shocked, some angry. One older woman in the front row stood and said, "Karen, is this true?" Karen, still panting slightly, straightened her posture and hissed, "He's lying. He hates this community. He's always hated us." She turned toward the crowd. "This is his revenge for being irrelevant." I didn't react. Angie stepped forward and handed the board chair a printed transcript of the HOA bylaws alongside my exemption clause. A board member skimmed it and said, "He's right. He's not even in the HOA. He never was." That broke the dam. Questions started flying. Who authorized the vendors? Why did we spend HOA money? Did Karen sign checks? Were there reimbursements? What if we get sued? Karen started backing away, her smile now completely gone. She tried to retake the podium, but the board chair raised his hand and said, "This meeting is suspended until legal counsel reviews these documents." Karen shouted, "You can't do this. This is my wedding." But no one was listening anymore. People had seen too much. The perfect image she'd crafted was shattering in real time. As we left the building, Sandra, the board member who'd called me earlier, caught up to me in the parking lot. "I didn't know it was this bad," she said, looking mortified. I just nodded. She asked, "What happens now?" I told her that depended on Karen. If she stopped pushing, maybe this could die quietly. But if she tried to follow through, I had every right to file criminal charges and a civil suit. Sandra nodded slowly and walked away, rubbing her temples like she had a migraine brewing. Angie was beaming the whole drive back. She said it was better than any courtroom case she'd tried all year. "You know she's going to try something stupid, right?" I nodded. "She has no reverse gear." Angie chuckled. "Good. That means we'll get her with the next move. Because this time, there'll be cops involved." The next morning, my trail cams sent an alert. At 4:38 a.m., Karen's cousin, a lanky man with a greasy ponytail and a utility vest, had snuck onto the property and spray-painted a huge X on one of the trees near the dock. He also left behind a stake with pink ribbon and what looked like a measuring tape. They were marking it again. Plotting. Karen hadn't backed off. She was doubling down. That meant only one thing. 'Twas the last place on earth Karen should have ever tried to conquer. The wedding day began like any other Saturday on the lake, with fog hanging low over the water and birds chattering in the trees, oblivious to the madness about to unfold. I was up early, as always, sipping coffee on the porch with Bear curled at my feet. I had half convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, Karen would give up and relocate the event. But that hope disappeared at precisely 7:17 a.m., when my trail cams pinged again. I tapped the app, pulled up the footage, and there they were, 3 white vans rolling down the gravel path like a moving circus. Men in tuxedo vests jumped out, unloading folding chairs, boxes of white roses, and something wrapped in satin that I could only assume was a wedding altar. And there, standing like the general of a doomed army, was Karen. Dressed head to toe in white lace, high heels clomping through the mud, barking orders into a walkie-talkie. She had truly lost it. I didn't waste time. I called the sheriff's office and gave them the case number Angie had helped me file earlier in the week. The deputy on the line didn't even sound surprised. We've had a few complaints already about some unauthorized activity in the area, he said. We'll be there shortly. I hung up, grabbed Bear's leash, and walked out toward the dock, taking my time. I wanted Karen to see me. When she finally spotted me, her face twisted into a smile so forced it looked painful. "Oh, good morning, Miles," she called, like I was an invited guest instead of the property owner. "Beautiful day for a celebration, isn't it?" I stopped in the middle of my own driveway. "You have 10 minutes to leave, Karen." Her smile faltered just for a second. Then she adjusted her veil and said sweetly, "You're welcome to stay, of course. There's plenty of food, and I arranged for non-alcoholic options just for you." It took everything in me not to laugh. This wasn't passive aggression anymore. This was delusion wearing a wedding dress. I pulled out my phone and filmed the whole scene. Behind her, workers were setting up rows of chairs. A violinist tuned her instrument. Some teenage ushers in bow ties started placing programs on each seat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. 5 minutes later, I heard sirens in the distance. Karen heard them too. She turned her head like a deer catching wind of a hunter and hissed something into her walkie-talkie. 2 of the decorators froze. One of them looked around like they'd just realized they were in the middle of a crime scene. I stayed where I was, arms crossed, phone still recording. The sheriff's SUV rolled in with dust flying behind it, followed by 2 cruisers. When the officers stepped out, they didn't come straight to me. They went to Karen. That told me everything. They already knew who the problem was. One of the deputies, a tall guy with a salt and pepper mustache and a clipboard, walked up to her and said, "Ma'am, we've received multiple complaints and have evidence of unlawful trespass." Karen's voice went up 2 octaves instantly. "This is a misunderstanding, officer. I'm the HOA President. We had a verbal agreement with the owner." "That's me," I called from behind her. "There was no agreement." She turned to me, eyes wide. I blinked slowly and said, "You're trespassing. Again." She looked at the deputy, eyes pleading. "You can't be serious. This is my wedding. The mayor is coming." "The mayor's not here," the deputy replied flatly. "And neither is a legal permit. You're being ordered to vacate." Karen began to shake, her perfectly styled curls bouncing with every tremor. She grabbed one of the floral arrangements and hurled it to the ground. "I paid for this. Do you hear me? This was supposed to be my day." The DJ, who had already started unloading speakers, looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Someone in the crowd of arriving guests muttered, "This is insane. I don't think this is even her house." The deputy took a calm step forward. "Ma'am, I need you to put your hands behind your back." Karen screamed. It wasn't just a scream of frustration. It was primal, theatrical, like every ounce of rage and entitlement had finally broken free of its well-manicured cage. She backed away, almost tripping over her heels, clutching at her veil like it could shield her from reality. Another officer moved in, gently but firmly taking her by the arm. She shrieked, struggling, accusing the officers of sexism, harassment, betrayal. One of her bridesmaids tried to intervene and was quickly pushed back by another guest whispering, "Don't get involved. This is on video." And it was. Oh, it definitely was. Phones were out. Cameras were rolling. I didn't even need to film anymore. Karen's public breakdown was being broadcast live to a dozen Facebook pages and local community groups. When the deputies finally escorted her into the cruiser, still shrieking about her ruined dreams and legal vengeance, the applause that broke out from the back rows was so loud it startled a squirrel off a tree branch nearby. The sheriff approached me afterward. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just disappointed it had to come to this." He looked over at the destroyed decorations and the discarded veil fluttering in the wind. "I've seen a lot in this town, but this one's going in the weird file." He handed me a card. "Let us know if there's any retaliation. We'll handle it." I thanked him, shook his hand, and watched as the cruisers drove off, Karen's echoing wails